Think about the moment that made you who you are. Maybe it was something your parents said. Maybe it was a traumatic experience. Maybe it was the day you decided to change your life. Now answer this. Did that moment actually happen the way you remember it? Because neuroscience has proven that every personality-defining memory you have has been rewritten dozens, maybe hundreds of times. The formative experience that shaped you, it is fiction. The trauma you've been processing for years, it happened differently. The proud moment that gave you confidence, your brain invented half of it. You are not the product of your past. You're the product of stories you've been telling yourself about a past that never existed, and I can prove it. Let's start with a simple question. What is your earliest memory? Really think about it. How old were you? Where were you? Who was there? Now, hold that memory in your mind because I'm about to tell you something that will make you question everything. According to research published in Psychological Science in 2014, nearly 40% of people's first memories are false. Not slightly inaccurate, completely fabricated. Researchers interviewed over 6,000 people about their earliest memories and found that nearly half reported memories from ages 2 or younger, which is neurologically impossible. The hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming long-term memories, isn't developed enough to create lasting memories until around age 3.5. So if you think you remember your second birthday, you don't. You remember photographs you were shown. You remember stories your parents told you. You remember a reconstruction your brain created decades later. But you don't remember the actual event because you weren't neurologically capable of recording it. But here is where it gets worse. It is not just your earliest memories that are false. It is most of them. Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, one of the world's leading experts on false memory, has spent 40 years demonstrating that human memory is not a recording device. It is a reconstruction engine. Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't play back a video file. It rebuilds the memory from fragments. And during that rebuilding process, it incorporates new information, current beliefs, and emotional states. You're not accessing the past. You're creating a version of the past that makes sense to your present self. In one of Loftus's most famous experiments, she showed participants footage of a car accident. Afterward, she asked them, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other versus how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Just changing one word from hit to smashed increased people's speed estimates by 9 miles per hour. Even more disturbing, a week later, participants who heard the word smashed were twice as likely to report seeing broken glass in the accident footage. There was no broken glass. It never existed, but the word smashed created an expectation, and their brains filled in the missing details with false information that felt completely real. Now, think about your own life. How many times have you told a story about yourself? How many times have you replayed a traumatic moment or a triumphant achievement in your mind? Every single time you did that, you changed it. You added details. You removed complications. You adjusted the emotional tone. You transformed messy reality into a coherent narrative. And that narrative is what you believe is your past. But it is not your past. It is a story you've been editing for years. Let me give you a more disturbing example. In 1990, a man named George Franklin was convicted of murder based entirely on his daughter's recovered memory. 20 years after the crime, Eileen Franklin suddenly remembered watching her father kill her childhood friend. Her memory was incredibly detailed. She could describe what everyone was wearing, the weather, the exact words spoken. The jury believed her. George Franklin went to prison. 5 years later, his conviction was overturned. Why? Because every single detail in Eileen's memory matched newspaper reports that had been published at the time of the murder. She hadn't remembered the event. She had read about it as a child, forgotten reading about it. And then years later, her brain reconstructed those news reports as a first-person memory. She genuinely believed she witnessed a murder that she never saw. Her father's life was destroyed by a memory that never happened. This isn't a rare anomaly. This is how memory works. In the 1980s and 90s, during what became known as the Satanic Panic, thousands of people recovered memories of being abused in satanic rituals involving human sacrifice, cannibalism, and organized conspiracies. Therapists using suggestive techniques helped patients retrieve these memories. The memories were vivid, the emotions were real, the trauma was undeniable, but none of it happened. Extensive FBI investigations found zero evidence of any satanic conspiracy. What they found instead was an epidemic of false memories created through leading questions, hypnosis, and the brain's willingness to fabricate entire histories when given the right suggestions. Paul Ingram, a respected sheriff's deputy, confessed to years of satanic ritual abuse after his daughters accused him. Under pressure from therapists and interrogators, he began remembering horrific acts he supposedly committed. He provided detailed confessions. He believed his own memories, except none of it was real. A psychologist later proved that Ingram could be made to remember completely fictitious events just through suggestion. Paul Ingram went to prison for crimes that never occurred, convicted by memories that were manufactured during the investigation itself. Now here is the terrifying part. You might be thinking, well, those are extreme cases, my memories are reliable, but they are not. In 2015, researchers Julia Shaw and Stephen Porter conducted an experiment where they convinced innocent people that they had committed crimes as teenagers. 70% of participants developed detailed false memories of assault, theft, or other serious crimes within 3 interview sessions. These weren't gullible people. They were university students who were told at the beginning of the study that the researchers would be testing the reliability of memory, even knowing they might be manipulated, even being explicitly warned. 70% still created completely false memories of criminal acts they never committed. Think about what that means for your personality. You make decisions based on past experiences, right? You avoid certain situations because something bad happened before. You pursue certain goals because of lessons you learned. You choose partners based on patterns you identified in previous relationships. But what if those experiences are distorted? What if the lessons you learned came from events that didn't happen the way you remember? What if you've been avoiding opportunities for decades because of a trauma that your brain exaggerated or even invented? There is a concept in psychology called the narrative identity. It is the idea that your sense of self is essentially a story you tell about who you are, where you came from, and where you're going. That story is built from memories. But if the memories are unreliable, then the story is fiction. And if the story is fiction, then the self is fiction. You are a character in a novel you've been writing your entire life without realizing you're the author. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He wrote, "I have done that," says my memory. "I cannot have done that," says my pride, and remains inexorable. Eventually, memory yields. What Nietzsche recognized is that we don't remember the past accurately. We remember the past in a way that is consistent with who we want to be. If something doesn't fit our self-narrative, we either forget it or rewrite it. Your memory serves your ego, not truth. Every time there is a conflict between what actually happened and what you need to believe happened, your memory will eventually change to protect your identity. This is why siblings who grew up in the same house will have completely different memories of their childhood. It is not that one is lying and the other is telling the truth. They both experienced different childhoods because they each constructed different narratives to explain their lives. Your brother remembers your father as strict and cold because that narrative explains why he became rebellious. You remember your father as supportive and kind because that narrative explains why you became successful. Same father, same childhood, two completely different pasts. Researchers have documented this phenomenon extensively. When couples divorce, their memories of the relationship change. Happy memories become reinterpreted as warning signs they missed. Conflicts that seemed minor at the time become evidence of fundamental incompatibility. The past literally changes based on the present. You're not remembering the relationship accurately. You're creating a version of the relationship that justifies your current reality. And it goes deeper. There is a phenomenon called retrieval, induced forgetting. Every time you remember something, you strengthen that memory, but you also weaken related memories. So the more you tell a story about yourself, the more that version becomes dominant, and alternative versions fade away. You're not just distorting the past, you're erasing other possible pasts. Your personality is built on the memories you've rehearsed the most, which are usually the ones that create the most coherent story, not the ones that are most accurate. Let me give you a personal example that might resonate. Think about an argument you had with someone you love. Maybe it was last week, maybe it was years ago. Now think about how you remember that argument versus how they probably remember it. You remember what they said that hurt you. You remember your reasonable responses. You remember trying to be fair while they were being unreasonable. Now flip it. They remember what you said that hurt them. They remember their reasonable responses. They remember trying to be fair while you were being unreasonable. You're both absolutely convinced your version is correct. You're both completely certain of your memories, and you're both wrong, because you're each remembering a version of the argument that casts you as the protagonist and them as the antagonist. The actual argument, the objective sequence of events, is gone forever. What remains are two incompatible narratives, both believed with absolute certainty. This is the foundation of gaslighting. Gaslighting works because memory is malleable. An abusive partner doesn't just lie to you, they exploit your brain's natural tendency to doubt itself. They offer an alternative version of events confidently and repeatedly, and eventually your brain starts to integrate their version into your memory. This isn't weakness. This is how memory functions. You cannot have a perfect recording of the past to compare against their claims. All you have is your reconstruction, and their reconstruction, and the creeping doubt about which one is real. And because memory changes every time you access it, the more you doubt, the more your original memory degrades, until eventually you genuinely cannot remember what actually happened. You've been gaslit, not just by another person, but by your own neurology. Social media has turned this into an epidemic. You see an event online, you read commentary about it, you see memes, you discuss it with friends months later, you remember the event, but you don't remember if you actually watched the video or just saw reactions to it. You don't remember if you read the article or just the headline. Your memory of the event is now a composite of hundreds of fragments from different sources, stitched together into something that feels like a coherent experience. You'll argue passionately about what happened based on a memory that is part reality, part interpretation, part hearsay, and part imagination. And you'll never know which parts are which. The Mandela effect is the collective version of this. Millions of people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. He died in 2013. Millions of people remember the Berenstain Bears being spelled Berenstein. It never was. Millions of people remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," he said. "No, I am your father." These aren't minor details. These are vivid, confident memories shared by huge populations. And they're all wrong. Which means, if collective memory can be that unreliable about verifiable facts, your personal memory about unverifiable events is even less trustworthy. Now let's connect this to identity. Your personality is supposed to be stable, right? You're an introvert or an extrovert. You're anxious or confident. You're trustworthy or unreliable. But where do those labels come from? They come from patterns you've identified in your past behavior. Except your past behavior is remembered, not recorded. You remember the times you were anxious at parties, so you conclude you're an anxious person. So you avoid parties, which means you never get evidence that contradicts your anxiety narrative. You've created a self-fulfilling prophecy based on a memory that might be exaggerated or even false. There is research showing that people's personalities change far more than they think. When psychologists ask people to predict how much their personality will change in the next 10 years, people consistently underestimate it. But when they ask people how much their personality has changed in the last 10 years, people also underestimate it. We believe we're stable selves who have finally figured out who we are, but we're constantly changing. The stable self is an illusion created by narrative memory that smooths out contradictions and creates coherent story arcs. Nietzsche called this the will to power expressed through interpretation. You don't discover who you are. You decide who you are, and then you reinterpret your past to make that decision seem inevitable. If you decide you're a victim, you'll remember your past as a series of injustices. If you decide you're a survivor, you'll remember the same events as obstacles you overcame. Same past, different story, different personality. The past doesn't determine your identity. Your identity determines your past. And here is the most disturbing implication. If your personality is based on memories, and memories are constantly being rewritten, then your personality is constantly being rewritten too. You're not a fixed self navigating through time. You're a narrative that updates itself continuously. The you of 10 years ago isn't just gone. It never existed in the form you remember. You've been retconning your own history your entire life. This explains why people can change so dramatically after major life events. It is not that the event revealed who they really were. It is that the event gave them permission to rewrite their entire narrative. Someone gets divorced and suddenly remembers their marriage as a prison. Someone survives cancer and suddenly remembers their pre-diagnosis life as wasted. The past didn't change, but their memory of the past changed completely, and with it, their entire personality. So, what does this mean practically? It means almost everything you believe about yourself is potentially false. That childhood trauma that you think made you afraid of intimacy, it might have been way less significant than you remember, and your fear of intimacy might have come from something else entirely that you've forgotten. That moment of triumph that you think proved you could succeed. You might be remembering yourself as more competent than you actually were, which means your confidence is built on an inflated memory. Everything is suspect. Nothing is certain. But here is the paradox. You can't function without a narrative identity. You need to believe you're someone. You need to have a past that explains your present. Even if that past is partially or entirely fictional, it is psychologically necessary. Nietzsche recognized this. He said we need illusions to live. The question isn't whether your memories are accurate. They're not. The question is whether your memories are useful. Are the stories you tell about yourself empowering or limiting? Are you remembering your past in a way that opens possibilities or closes them? Because if your memory is going to be fiction anyway, you might as well write good fiction. You might as well construct a past that serves your future instead of imprisoning it. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are. You don't discover an authentic self buried under layers of social conditioning. You invent a self through the stories you choose to tell. And because those stories are based on malleable memories, you have more power than you think to change them. You're not trapped by your past, because your past is not fixed. It is being rewritten constantly. The only question is whether you're going to rewrite it consciously or let it be rewritten by accident, by other people's interpretations, by social media algorithms, by whatever narrative happens to be most convenient in the moment. There is a technique in trauma therapy called memory reconsolidation. When you recall a traumatic memory, there is a brief window where that memory becomes unstable and can be modified before it is stored again. Therapists use this window to help patients reprocess trauma, adding new information or new emotional associations that change how the memory is experienced. This isn't about denying what happened. It is about recognizing that the memory of what happened is separate from what happened, and the memory can be changed even if the event cannot. You can do this yourself, not with professional trauma. You should see a therapist for that, but with the smaller narratives that shape your personality. That time you failed and learned you weren't good enough. You can remember it as the time you tried something difficult and gained valuable information, that relationship that proved you're unlovable. You can remember it as incompatibility between two people who weren't right for each other. Same events, different stories, different personalities emerge. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't pretending bad things didn't happen. This is recognizing that your brain is going to construct a narrative anyway, and you have some influence over which narrative it constructs. You're already writing fiction. You might as well write intentionally, but there is a darker side to this. If everyone's personality is based on unreliable memories, then nobody really knows anyone, including themselves. You think you understand your partner because you've built a model of them based on memories of your interactions. But those memories are reconstructions. The person you think you know is a character you've created. The real person, whoever that is, remains fundamentally unknowable because you only have access to your distorted memories of them. This is why relationships fall apart when people say, "You're not the person I thought you were." They're right. You never were the person they thought you were. They were in love with a memory construct. And when new information contradicted that construct, the relationship couldn't survive because it was never based on reality in the first place. So where does this leave us? You are a collection of unreliable memories arranged into a narrative that you call a personality. That personality makes decisions that create new experiences, which become new memories that get distorted and integrated into an updated narrative that creates a new personality. You are not a thing, you are a process, a constantly updating story with an unreliable narrator. And the most terrifying part, you'll never know which parts are true. You'll never have access to objective reality. You'll never be able to compare your memories to what actually happened and correct the errors. You're trapped inside a reconstruction engine that presents its outputs as facts. You are living in a simulation created by your own brain, and you have no way to verify if the simulation bears any resemblance to reality. But maybe that is also liberating. If your entire personality is based on events that never happened the way you remember, then you're not as limited as you think. The past that is holding you back is fiction. The trauma that defines you is exaggerated. The beliefs you formed about yourself are based on distorted evidence, which means you can change. Not by fixing your past, but by recognizing your past is already changed every time you remember it. You can participate in that change consciously instead of letting it happen by accident. Your personality is not discovered. It is not revealed. It is not authentic to anything except the story you keep telling. So tell a better story. Remember your past in a way that creates the future you want, not by lying to yourself, but by recognizing you were already lying to yourself, and now you're going to lie more strategically. This is what Nietzsche meant by self-overcoming. You don't find yourself, you create yourself, and you create yourself by controlling the narrative, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to steer your reconstruction engine in a useful direction. Your entire personality is based on events that never happened the way you remember. So remake those events, rewrite your past, become someone else. You've been doing it accidentally your entire life. Now do it on purpose.